After a comprehensive review of the program, and with the support of President Hatch and university leadership, I've made the decision that we need a change in leadership, and I've relieved Coach Manning of his duties. Transitions like this are never easy for anyone involved, and I'm grateful for the way that Coach Manning, Julie, and Evan have poured their hearts into Wake Forest over the past 6 years. The 2017 will always be especially meaningful to Wake Forest fans. As the Deacons return to the NCAA tournament, Coach Manning deservedly received the Skip Prosser Man of the Year award, and John Collins was the 19th pick in the NBA draft. Additionally, Coach Manning had 6 individuals garner all-conference honors, 5 student athletes earn all-ACC academic accolades, and 3 players who are now representing the Deacs in the NBA. I wish Coach Manning nothing but success as he moves forward in his career, and I know that Demon Deacons everywhere join me in thanking him, Julie, and Evan for their service and dedication to the Winston-Salem community and to Wake Forest University. Now, because of COVID-19 social distancing measures, almost all of our men's basketball student athletes are currently at home and away from campus, and therefore the meeting Coach Manning and I held with them earlier today was via video conference rather than in person. Both Coach Manning and I shared a commitment that our players hear the news from us directly, and I was glad we were able to accomplish this. I'm proud of all the young men in our program, and I know that this transition and a time period of already great uncertainty is difficult. I will continue to visit with our team to get their feedback, their thoughts and suggestions as to the characteristics they want in their next head coach. Randolph Childress has agreed to serve as our acting head coach during the interim period. Obviously, Randolph has longstanding relationships and understands Wake Forest as well as anyone, and he is the right person, and I'm grateful for his willingness to assist our current student athletes and lead our program during this time of transition. As we move forward, I ask for the full support of Deacon Nation for our basketball student athletes who have played hard and with grit and determination throughout this season. We are grateful for the contributions of our seniors, Brandon Childress, Tori Johnson, Adrian White, and wish them all the best as they complete their degrees and prepare for their next step. Wake Forest has an incredible set of advantages. We have the world-class Shaw Basketball Complex and Sutton Sports Performance Center, a top-ranked university, a passionate fan base, a basketball-savvy region, and a basketball program with a winning historical tradition. We're in the heart of Tobacco Road, competing in the premier basketball league in the country, the Atlantic Coast Conference. A comprehensive search for the next head coach for Wake Forest basketball will begin immediately. I'll be in regular contact with President Hatch throughout this process, and I look forward to introducing the next leader for Wake Forest basketball in short order. With that, I encourage you to ask as many questions as you wish, as my availability will be limited until we introduce our next coach. Will?
All right, we're going to start with Connor O'Neill. Connor, if you unmute yourself, and everyone else, please stay muted. Go ahead, Connor.
Connor O'Neill with Winston-Salem Journal. It's coming through.
Connor, you put on your collar. I appreciate you doing that.
I did. Got all dressed up. John, if you could just help me out with the timeline here. The last game was 45 days ago, and I'm wondering what the process was for the season-ending review and how much of it is affected by the pandemic.
Well, Connor, obviously the pandemic has affected everybody in the world, literally, and it certainly has affected timing and process. And I never would have guessed when I was able to visit with our team and our staff after our last game in the Greensboro Coliseum that we'd be meeting like this to have on video conference. It's really unimaginable what we've all experienced. With that said, in the immediate aftermath of kind of the dawn of the pandemic, if we go back to those days after the tournament was canceled, our focus really as an institution has been on the health and safety of our student athletes and our students. and ensuring that the basic functions of the university and the ability to continue to move forward was there. As time goes by, we're able to resume things, and we never stopped working on this particular program because it is so important to all of us. Just like we haven't stopped with the day-to-day duties of whether it's 700 Zoom tutoring appointments for our academic services department each week, or leading and teaching our student athletes. But certainly, the onset of the pandemic played a role in the timing of today's announcement.
Connor, do you have a follow-up, or do we want to move on?
Yeah, if I could get a follow-up, given how much everything was delayed, would you expect the same kind of delays in announcing and hiring a new coach?
Well, we've all learned to adapt, and we're still working out the kinks a little bit from a technological standpoint. But we'll certainly follow, if you're asking the question, Connor, we'll certainly follow all social distancing, excuse me, and safety expectations. But I do believe we'll be able to move rather quickly into the process. There have been a couple recent changes. Texas had a change in women's basketball, for instance, and they were able to move right ahead with hiring a coach. And there's been a number of transitions in college basketball over the last month or so.
With that, we'll go to Les Johns. Les, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Good afternoon, John. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Obviously, there were lots of rumors about a large contract buyout with Coach Manning. What can you tell us about the negotiations to kind of wrap things up and be able to make this move? And is there anything about that piece that will inhibit your ability to bring the level of coach that you want to bring to Wake Forest? Thanks, John.
Well, Les, as you know, at Wake Forest, all personnel contracts and details are private and confidential, and that's certainly out of respect to Coach Manning. In terms of this overall decision, ultimately this was a basketball decision, and we made this decision based on what we believed was best for our student athletes, our program and university going forward.
Let's follow up.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
From a financial perspective, in the coronavirus era, are you hamstrung in any way in terms of the search? Is it a full go? Can you bring in top high profile candidates? Do you feel like you have the means necessary to put the program where you want it?
Well, Les, as you know, we have 5 core goals at Wake Forest that start with providing a world-class student-athlete experience, and one of those goals references fiscal integrity, and we'll certainly continue to practice fiscal discipline, but I don't have any hesitations about our ability to do the right thing, to hire the right coach for Wake Forest basketball.
Ed, we'll go to you. Ed Harden, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, John, let me ask you, first of all, I'm sure you have a short list of candidates. What kind of coach are we looking at? A young mid-major type coach, or are you looking more broad-based?
Well, Ed, I appreciate the question. We're going to find the very best possible coach we can for Wake Forest University. If you look at the coaching faculty here at Wake Forest, we have elite world-class coaches, and I know that we can attract a world-class coach for our basketball program. If you look at our history, if you think about, during this last few weeks, we lost Carl Tacey. I don't know how big of a name Carl Tacey was when he was hired at Wake Forest. We had coaches like Dave Odom, who was an assistant, who at the time had a losing record as a head coach when we hired him at Wake Forest. Skip Prosser, Dave Clausen, Jim Grobe, those were all coaches who came to Wake Forest and flourished. So we'll cast a wide net, knowing that this is a very, very special opportunity with tons of advantages. And I know that there are a number of coaches out there who will be very desirous of this particular job and opportunity.
Ed, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. You mentioned this as a basketball decision. Was it just a matter of losing, John? Was it with calls?
I'm sorry, say that again, please, Ed. It cut out on you.
You said this was a basketball decision. If this was a firing for cause, was the cause losing?
Well, this is an overall evaluation of the basketball program. And when you go into a program and look at things, you're looking at everything, the comprehensive organization of the program, how recruiting is organized, retention, commitment to academics, all those kinds of things. And so we went through a long evaluative process. And at the end, I know we've made the right decision to move Wake Forest basketball forward.
We'll go to Josh Graham. Josh, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Hey, John, thank you so much for doing this. I know you're not
Josh.
talking about the specifics of the buyout and you don't talk about contracts, but considering the pandemic, how many people across the country are losing jobs, and also the fact that, I mean, a lot of people were just concerned about how the buyout was funded. Can you confirm that it was all privately funded?
Well, you've asked several questions and made some statements with your questions. First of all, any decision we make at Wake Forest comes with with that reflection on our goals, including fiscal integrity and fiscal responsibility. In this particular decision, if you look at the overall program and where we are right now, the decision is supported, or the economics support the decision. As always, we don't comment specifically about agreements with former or current personnel, and I would caution against assuming the accuracy of any figures speculated in the media.
Josh, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Obviously, the attendance figures is something that was talked about a lot last season. How much, fiscally speaking, the direction of the Joel attendance impacted your decision to make a change, to see that was necessary?
Well, Josh, that's certainly a factor that goes into evaluating any program. And we know the environment that Wake Forest basketball offers. And we saw a couple moments of that this year. And I was encouraged to see that as a person that had been away for 19 years. This is a basketball town. People care about basketball in Winston-Salem and in the Triad and in the state of North Carolina. You know, we got a championship team in Winston-Salem this year at Winston-Salem State. And Wake Forest should have a championship basketball team as well. So we know that we've got an opportunity to continue to build on the strengths that we have, on the tradition that we have. And I'm grateful for the fans that were there this year. And certainly, I understand the responsibility that we have as it relates to that.
Lauren Walsh, if you want to take yourself off mute, we'll go to you.
Hi, John. First of all, it's nice to virtually meet you, Lauren Walsh from WXII.
Lauren,
Thank you again.
welcome to town.
Thank you. Thanks again for making yourself available today. I spoke to Coach Manning a couple of days ago, and he said he was excited to coach at Wake and looking forward to the upcoming season. So based on that, I'm wondering when you made this decision and when Coach Manning was notified.
Sure, Lauren, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm not at all surprised in Coach Manning's comments. He came to work every single day and continued to coach the team and work hard throughout his time here. I would say that we met yesterday morning early. Again, we do everything by WebEx here, which is not the way you'd want to have that kind of meeting. And we talked about my decision. And then again, as I said earlier, we were both committed to making sure that our players heard this from us directly. And I appreciate the people that have worked behind the scenes over the last little bit to help put this together. A lot of people scrambled without knowing why they were being scrambled to make this happen.
Lauren, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. On the next head coaching search, I'm wondering what qualities you are looking for in
So, Lauren, part of the, certainly there's some things that are kind of always there from a quality standpoint. But as I mentioned earlier, I've already told our team and our players that I want to hear from them what their desires are, what they believe that we need at Wake Forest, and what they want their next coach to do for them and for their team. Our student athletes are always going to be at the forefront of what we do at Wake Forest, just like the students of our university are the priority of this great university. So certainly we're looking for someone with great energy, who knows how to recruit and build relationships, can build a developmental system here to lead us to great success at Wake Forest.
Kevin Connolly, we'll go to you if you take yourself off mute.
Yeah, John, you talked a couple times about relationships. Is it important that this next coach, you've had a previous relationship with him in any way, and will that be a factor in hiring someone?
Well, Kevin, thanks very much for the question. It's good to see you there. I've been fortunate, in a 27 or so, I'm starting to lose track year career in athletics, and 10 years as a Power 5 athletics director. I do have a lot of relationships, and I feel like I do know a lot of coaches, but I've hired coaches before that I didn't know, that I hadn't known for a long time. It just really depends. We're looking for the best fit for Wake Forest, the best possible coach for Wake Forest to lead our program.
Kevin, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's good. You can keep going.
All right, we're going to circle back to Connor O'Neill if you want to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, John, I'm curious how much, if any, kind of a factor did in the past month or so did the transfer decisions of Mike Wynn, Sharon Wright, and especially Sean D. Brown, a key player who would have been a senior leader next year, to transfer and leave the program and basically say he'd rather play in the NBA or anywhere else, if that played a role in the program review also?
Sure. Well, certainly attrition and retention of our players is one of the factors in progressing players towards graduation, from entering as high school seniors, as college freshmen towards graduation. Those are all part of the factors of evaluation, among many things. But I want to be very clear, this decision didn't happen because of Sean D. Brown's decision, or, I would never want any fan to think that it's on them or Mike Wynn or Sharon Wright. That would be completely unfair to those young men. With that said, if you look at those classes of 2016, 17, and 18, we signed 9 players out of high school in those 3 classes, and we lost 9 of them. And so that does give concern. And, there's certainly lots of different reasons for those kinds of things, but that is an important factor for us. Certainly if you look at our other programs at Wake Forest, you look at our football program, we've been able to build it into a consistent winner because we are able to develop and retain players. Basketball, has a special set of challenges in that regard, but that is still incredibly important.
Connor, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I know this is early in the process, but do you or Randolph have a handle right now if there will be any more attrition, or if there could be 1 or 2 of those players that are in the portal currently come back because Coach Manning is not going to be the coach?
Connor, that's a fair question to ask, but I know that Randolph will do a great job of supporting our players, and as will I and Jane Caldwell and the entire support staff around men's basketball at Wake Forest.
We'll go to Aaron Beard. Aaron, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Hey, John, thanks for taking time to do this. You touched on
Aaron, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see anybody these days.
Amen.
You touched on selling points for the program, the things that you have to sell with facilities and so forth. There's also the reality of this is a program that, while having tradition, has struggled for the better part of a decade. So I'm curious, how do you balance that selling point to a candidate, but also being realistic that there's a lot of work ahead to kind of get things, get some traction for the program it hasn't had recently?
Sure. Connor, back on, excuse me, Aaron. I'm sorry, Aaron. I think you were there on February 19th when we had an incredible day celebrating the 1995 reunion, or celebrating the 1995 team and the 1995 ACC championship. I think we had 80 former players there that day. They came from 5 or 6 decades. They were NBA players from 4 or 5 decades. So Wake Forest basketball is not a program where there's been just pockets of success. Wake Forest basketball is actually a program where there's been sustained periods of great success and some pockets of frustration. And certainly the last 10 years has been one of the longer pockets with some exceptions. And so I know, being on that floor that day, that evening with President Hatch, and seeing all those players come out and seeing Rodney Rogers and seeing Josh Howard and seeing so many great players from the past and seeing Tim Duncan. I don't know how many of y'all know where your letter jacket is, but Tim Duncan knew where his Wake Forest letter jacket was. And he had the wherewithal that day, with all the things that he does in his life and all the responsibilities he has and a full-time job in the NBA, Tim Duncan had the wherewithal to pull his Wake Forest Letterman's jacket out of the closet when he came to Winston-Salem to salute Coach Odom and be part of that incredible celebration. And, seeing Mark Blucas on the sideline and sitting next to Tim and Scooter Banks and Trelawney, just one after another, reminds us that this is a great basketball school. And we also happen to be a great golf school and football school and soccer school. And as you start to think about it, this is an incredible athletics program. And our men's basketball program historically has been part of that leadership. And it's my expectation that we get back to that point.
All right, we'll move on to Luke DeCock. Luke, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Hello, Luke.
Following up on Aaron's question and everything you're just talking about, in terms of getting that back and putting the program back to the level that you talked about, as opposed to these pockets of frustration, to use your words, is it just winning? Is there more than that? Like, what has to happen now that you have this opportunity to go in a different direction to get back to that point?
We've got to have the right plan and the right organizational structure. I know we've got the right facilities. We've got among the best. The Shaw Basketball Complex is one of the best premier basketball facilities in the country. The strength and conditioning space in there is as good or better than most NBA teams. We've got a top 30 university. We've got a tremendous university leadership. We have engaged alums like Chris Paul. There's a ton of factors here that enable Wake Forest to be successful. So I'm very optimistic that with the right leadership, that our program will be successful.
Eddie Hughes, if you want to take yourself off mute, we'll go to you.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey,
Hey,
I did not hear that. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
Hey, John. Just wanted to confirm there's been reports that you have hired a search firm to help with the search of the next head coach. Is that true?
Well, I have not had time to read any reports, so I can't speak to any specific reports. I will use a search firm in this process.
Quick follow-up. What was the players' reaction once you and Coach Manning told them today? What was that like?
Well, again, our players, we were glad that we were able for them to hear it from us first. And obviously, this is a moment in time of uncertainty already. And so I appreciated them being there. They did not know we hit them cold. And so I think we have a tough bunch of guys. And we were able to have a little bit of conversation then. And I've had some follow-up texts from some of our players. And we'll meet again with our student athletes and myself later this afternoon. And we'll continue those those dialogues. So obviously they know Coach Manning cares about them deeply, and it's a tough time for them.
Chris Lee, we'll go to you if you want to take yourself off mute.
Hi, John. Chris Lee from WRAL. How are you doing today?
Chris, good to see you again.
All right. I want to ask you this. Will Randolph Childress be considered for the head coaching position? And if not, are you requiring the next head coach to retain him on the staff?
Thank you, Chris. Our search is wide open. There are no preconceived or excluded candidates in our search at this point. The ability of the next coach, or let me say it in a different way, the next coach will have complete autonomy to determine who he or she believes are the right fits for their staff.
Thank you.
Les Johnson, we'll go to you. Les, you want to take yourself off mute?
John, thank you once again. Just curious, Coach Manning described the process, the evaluation process to us at least a couple times as being, extremely extensive. And he failed on multiple opportunities to tell us that he had been assured the opportunity to return next season. How would you best describe how the process went the last few weeks? How many times did you meet with Coach Manning for this review? And did he kind of know through most of the process that this would possibly be the end outcome?
Well, first of all, Les, I've been blessed, Mary Lawrence and I both, to get to know Danny and Julie Manning and Evan over the last year since I came to Wake Forest. I watched Evan as a student athlete when he was at Kansas, when I was at Kansas State. So I appreciate all of them, and they're all good people. And I know that they will be successful in the future. Coach Manning and I met quite a bit throughout this past year. I wanted to learn everything I could to help support him and support the program. And we had regular, meetings from time to time. And then, over the last several months, obviously that was more frequent. They were good, honest discussions, and I appreciated that.
We'll go back to Kevin Connolly, if you want to take yourself off mute.
John, there was the question about the consulting firm, but is there going to be a search committee within the university, or are you going to kind of handle this one by yourself?
Kevin, thanks for asking that question. While I'm not going to talk about specific details about that right now, I will do a little bit of that more when we introduce our next coach. Every search that we run is inclusive, both in process and in who we talk to. So I will certainly consult with appropriate folks, both in the athletics program and around our university and others as I need.
Josh Graham, we'll go back to you.
You've made plenty of hires over the years, but as you said, this is such a different time. So I'm interested what you view to be the biggest challenge, since travel is limited, since maybe you don't get as much of an opportunity to sell the actual university itself. What do you view as the biggest challenge ahead with making this next hire?
Well, thank you, Josh. One of the challenges is that this is going to be a desired job. And so we're going to have to make some hard decisions in this process. There will be great candidates. There are already great candidates reaching out. And we'll have to make hard decisions because there will be so many great candidates for this job, in my opinion. Certainly in terms of, most of the time nowadays, in searches like these, candidates aren't coming to campus. We've got pretty good video coverage. There was many of y'all did an incredible job last fall when we opened Shaw Basketball Complex and Sutton Sports Performance Center, of showcasing our world-class athletics facilities that these donors and others have provided for us here at Wake Forest. So some of that stuff's a little bit maybe not as important as it might have been back in the old days. I think the other thing, Josh, is that necessity is the mother of invention. And what a lot of us have learned, although I'm sure that we all yearn for real in-person meetings again, you can have good conversations on WebEx or on Zoom. And, I never would have thought that. I've always met with the team in the locker room, immediately after a coaching transition. And I'm worried about that, what's it going to be like when I'm not there with our guys. But we were able to do that to some extent reasonably well in that format. So we'll adapt. The COVID-19 is not going to stop the United States of America, and COVID-19 is not going to stop this basketball search.
And then we got time for some more questions, guys, but just a few more. So we're going to go back to Connor.
Yeah, John, you mentioned, I think just now that you've already had some candidates reach out. I'm curious what the timeline was for that, if they reached out to you or if you were reaching out to them or their agents in the last, however many hours.
Yeah, I've done no outreach, Connor, until 3 hours ago or 4.5 hours ago. We didn't have an open job. So, my focus right now and today has been on getting ready for this and also, most importantly, connecting with our student athletes, meeting with our outgoing staff, which Coach Manning and I did at 10:30 after we had met with the team. And so, if the phone beeps or buzzes or whatever, sometimes I'll look at it, sometimes I don't have time to look at it.
And then we'll finish up with Les Johns unless somebody else wants to jump in the chat. Go ahead, Les.
Yeah, I got all day, so just keep it coming.
Don't tell us that, John. We'll keep you hanging on. Obviously, I can't imagine that you woke up yesterday morning and came to the final decision that was the day. Obviously, this is something that's been in motion for you for some period of time. My question is, did at any point you think you would not be able to get this accomplished given, the circumstances in the world, John? I'm sure that probably presented several obstacles to you.
Les, I appreciate the question, but I think it should be known, and I hope it's known, that for any leader or manager or in an organization, having to make a change and having to let someone go is not what you wake up in the morning hoping you have to do that day. It's the last thing that you want to do. And sometimes leadership transitions are necessary. I know Danny Manning's going to be successful in his future. This was a decision ultimately that, with the president's full support and our university administration and university leadership's full support, was the right one to make for our student athletes and our university.
And then we'll do two final questions. We'll start with Ed Harden, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, John, I'm curious. This is probably not the only performance you're looking at. Are there any other moves that you're going to make that you could potentially make in the coming days and weeks?
Well, that's an interesting question, Ed. This has been my sole focus over the last little bit, and my sole focus now turns to the search for our next head men's basketball coach.
And then we'll finish up with Connor. Connor, you go ahead.
John, curious if you have a style of play in mind. We've seen the pack line defense work for Tony Bennett. We've seen offense work at other places. If you have a specific basketball style that you're looking for in the next coach.
Connor, there's lots of different ways to build successful programs. What I'm most interested in hearing is how the candidates that come to us or that come before us articulate their vision for success at Wake Forest and articulate how they're going to organize their recruiting efforts, how they're going to approach building a championship culture at Wake Forest. The process is really, really important, and understanding the value and the intangible advantages that Wake Forest has, which are very many. In the city of Winston-Salem, it's an incredible city with great leadership, great people that care about basketball, care about student athletes. I know we have coaches out there that treasure those kinds of things, and I'm looking forward to connecting with the right person to lead our program. John, any closing thoughts as we move forward? Well, thank you. I appreciate the effort that all of you have made to be here. I had to learn I'm not supposed to look at the screen to look at you. I'm supposed to look at the camera down here, so I apologize for the eyes bouncing back and forth. I do want to thank the people behind the scenes, and also want to send thoughts to Coach Manning's extended staff and support staff. They certainly are good people who've worked very hard for Wake Forest. So again, please everybody be safe. You heard Mayor Joines the other day talking about mask Winston-Salem, and let's get back to higher education, learning on campus, and ball games just as soon as we can.